Hello and welcome to another episode of Osgoode Community Chronicles, where we explore the rich history, vibrant events, and remarkable stories that make up the Osgoode ward and surrounding communities. In each episode, we dive deep into our local heritage, drawing from the meticulous records and research of our local historians and families. These invaluable resources allow us to bring you stories from the past, ensuring that the traditions that shaped our community are shared with future generations. Whether you're a lifelong resident like me, or a newcomer, join us as we tie our fascinating history to the present-day version of our beloved region of Osgoode and surrounding communities. I'm your host, Tracy Daviero. I got some wonderful feedback from the Casey family last week about the episode, and I hope that each of your families enjoys listening to the episodes that I feature your family in, but also all the other episodes as well. So I hope I made some new fans last weekend, and I'm happy to continue producing these episodes for you, and I hope you keep tuning in. People ask me all the time where I get the information for these podcasts. I get it through sort of a variety of sources. Eventually, I'll be interviewing people to talk about their families, but a lot of it comes from recorded information that's in print and online. I look through the Pioneer Families publications and the other publications that I have here that belong to my dad, Mike Daly, and others. Me, I've bought some too. I search family tree websites online. I search obituaries. I search grave sites, all to make the connections and continue the family histories and stories that I bring you every week. But sometimes when I search a name, I go down a rabbit hole because something unexpected comes up in my search results. Sometimes that's a good thing, and sometimes it's not so good. It definitely was not good last week. I searched the name John Campbell for today's episode, and I was sad to see that what came up first was the obituary of an old close friend of mine, John Campbell McDiarmid. John and I worked together at the Manotick Messenger for a couple of years, and he actually introduced me to his best friend and roommate, Dave, who I then went on to date for 3 years. We were close. We had so many good times, and when I saw his face in the picture, in his obituary, so many memories came crashing back. Even stranger, the same day that this popped up, the day that is the day that I was planning to be with Jeff Morris at the Sens game. Jeff's family, of course, owned the Manotick Messenger, and he continues to, and we all worked together. He didn't know John died either. It was a shock for him as well, and we're both sad. John died young, too young. I don't know what the cause was, but he was an incredibly funny, charming, and sometimes, often, philosophical guy. A talented writer, gifted musician, a sports enthusiast, and an all-around great guy. Family meant absolutely everything to him. I want to send my deepest condolences to the McDiarmids and to his wife Lynn and their 2 kids, and to all of his other family, and especially his friends. Rest in peace, John. I truly wish we stayed in touch. You were such a great friend. In today's episode, we'll have our news and events calendar as usual. Our business segment, we'll talk a little bit about the village of Vernon, of old. Our historical segment spotlights the McDiarmid family, at least some of them. There are a lot. On our Community Voices segment, I will share an article from Ottawa Citizen about New Vernon. And we'll finish up with another mental health moment. Let's get into it. Every week on the podcast, we share some of the local events that are taking place in the area. So many wonderful people doing wonderful things. Please be sure that you get out to support their efforts. Check into the community calendar for events we talk about on this podcast. You can find it on our website, osgoodecommunitychronicles.com. It's in the menu, community calendar, or you can just put in /calendar. Stanley's Sugar Bush is still open until April 20th. Now that the spring weather is here, and Connor Mockett said so, it's not just me, it's time to get out and have some fun at the farm. We're also tapping our trees for syrup this weekend as well. We have 5 trees. It's a super short season, so don't miss it. On March 16th, there's a St. Patrick's Day dance at Pierce's Corners Hall in North Gore. It starts at 1 p.m. and goes till 5. There's dinner and Irish entertainment, and tickets are $25 per person. The Russell Legion is also hosting a St. Patrick's Day party on March 17th. They have Irish stew and entertainment, and the doors open there at 2 p.m. Don't forget the Metcalfe Meet and Greet group is holding their kickoff meeting on March 19th at 6:30 p.m. at the Metcalfe Golf Course. This event is to pull together plans and make connections with the business owners who want to take part in their May 10th meet and greet. You can reserve your seat by contacting Mark Sauve. Also on March 19th, Men's Mugs is at Oh Yeah, and that's hosted by Ross. It's on the third Wednesday of every month, and that the Men's Mug group meets. They meet at 10 a.m. Last month, Constable Andrew Worth was their guest, and he shared valuable insights on community and home safety, as well as current scams targeting seniors. Join them for coffee, conversation, and community. Next week is the Greeley Players presenting Grease at the Greeley Community Center from March 19th to 23rd. It's so exciting. I can't wait. We have tickets for the 23rd. I think there's still tickets available for most nights or most performances. It's their once-a-year performance, the Greeley Players, and they do an amazing job. So if you haven't gotten your tickets yet, go and grab them. On March 20th, the Russell Association of Performing Arts, RAPA, has partnered with the Russell Legion for a murder mystery dinner theater event. It's running the 20th, 21st, and 22nd. And the show is called Last Call at Shea Moore, and it's a thrilling 1920s murder mystery set in a lively jazz club. When a shocking death occurs, a colorful cast of performers, socialites, and staff become suspects. With sharp wit and twists, this comedic whodunit keeps everyone guessing until the end. Sounds like so much fun. The tickets are $40 and it includes spaghetti dinner with Caesar salad and strawberry shortcake for dessert. There is a cash bar and of course you get your evening of entertainment. March 22nd, the Business Sisters are hosting their wellness and afternoon tea at the Willow House in Russell. And I told you last week, the Business Sisters Group is a business community organization for rural area-based and small-town women-owned businesses. Check this event out if you haven't already. The ticket price is $109 for the day, and they have it's a retreat featuring a yoga class, meditation, and afternoon tea. On March 22nd, the Russell Flea Market's second last market of the season is being held at Russell High School, starting at 9 a.m. Each market date brings new vendors, so no two shopping experiences are the same. And on the 22nd, you'll find fresh baked goods, thrifted apparel, dehydrated dog treats, handmade soaps, wood crafts, children's books, and a whole lot more. Entry is free, and you're sure to find something for every taste and style. On March 23rd, the first of a series of 7 barn quilt workshops is taking place at Osgoode Legion with Rideau River Barn Quilts, Shannon Just. Register ahead of time by contacting Shannon. On March 23rd as well, Garden Like a Pro seminar is taking place at Robert Plant Greenhouses in Navan from 10 until noon. Horticulturalist Rebecca Boyer is the teacher for this workshop where you can learn how to create a thriving garden in any space. It is the time of year, you know. Learn how to start seeds, activate your soil, and nurture a balanced environment to grow healthy plants, even your own food. She'll teach companion planting, soil care, and tips to keep your plants flourishing year-round. And it's only $5 per person to attend. And finally, there's a new program alert at Oh Yeah. Their Junior Teen Book Club takes place at No Go Coffee every second Friday. This is for grades 5 to 8 aged kids, and it starts at 4:30 p.m. The dates for that are March 28th, April 11th, and April 26th. And don't forget to tune into the community calendar for all of the Youth Association activities. We have Osgoode, Greeley, Manotick, and Kempville in there, and also our Legions with all of their regular activities as well. Everything is in the community calendar. And that is our news and events for this week. In this week's Business Spotlight, we share an excerpt from the Community Stories publication Plain Living in Osgoode Township, put out by the Osgoode Township Museum, and this is about Vernon. The Glasgow Trading Post was located at the southeast corner of Lawrence Street and Highway 31 in the village of Vernon, Ontario. The lot was purchased in March 1877 by Thomas Bow of Winchester from William and Mary Porteous. In that same summer, Joseph Taylor constructed the store for Thomas Bow. The post office and general store was named the Glasgow Trading Post by Bow, its operator for a few years. George Whitelaw and an assistant, Jesse McConnell, tailored in the Glasgow Trading Post for several years. Over the years, the store underwent many changes, expansions, and renovations. The Glasgow Trading Post became the Porteous store in 1900. It stayed in the Porteous family for almost 90 years until it was sold to the Tams in late 1989. The store closed in November 2002, closing out 125 years as a general merchant and grocery store. New owners are trying to create commercial interest in operating smaller boutique within the space of the old store. The Porteous store, while the longest lasting, shared the market with others such as the McKercher store, which later became McDonald's. Footwear and a limited supply of clothing were included in the store's stock. Along with an ample supply of groceries, many bulk items were sold years ago. White and brown sugar came in large wooden barrels, but the customer bagged his own, choosing 1, 2, or 5-pound bags depending on his individual needs. Bananas hung in huge bunches from the ceiling, and once again, depending on the amount the customer desired, he would break off a smaller bunch. Molasses and vinegar came in 45-gallon barrels. Shoppers were asked to bring their own containers for these particular products. One time, the end of a large barrel of sticky molasses broke as the cask was being skidded to the store's basement. Needless to say, there was a terrible mess. Sawdust and shavings were used to clean up the goo. Farmers brought in eggs, chickens, ducks, and turkeys to exchange for required grocery supplies. These farm products were then taken to Ottawa by sleigh or wagon, and in later years by truck. They were sold in the city stores. Feed obtained from Winchester, coal, and kerosene for coal oil lamps, which was taken home in the shopper's own container, were also fast-moving products. Beginning in 1915 until the 1960s, gasoline was pumped adjacent to the store. It was pumped by hand into a glass globe measuring 1 gallon by using a funnel. The gas was poured into the tanks. The gas pumps were situated behind the actual building, but for added convenience when Highway 31 was constructed, they were changed to be parallel with the traffic. In the middle of the century, an extra feature was added to W.J. Porteous & Sons. It was an egg grading station. As a sideline to the dairy farming in the area, many kept poultry, so there was a definite need for the station. Employees, such as Mary Watt, handled anywhere from 1,000 to 3,500 eggs weekly, with a range of payments up to $1,200. Farmers brought their eggs to the store. They were candled and weighed. According to the eggs' quality, the farmers were paid. They were boxed or placed in 12 cartons and then taken to the city stores or restaurants. The delivery truck traveling to Ottawa brought back the necessary supplies for the store. There were some days in more recent times when employees of the food liner could barely survive the seemingly long work hours, but years ago hours were 7 a.m. to midnight, 6 days a week. The store was heated by 2 pot-belly stoves which burned coal. Every night and morning, including Sunday, the fires had to be stoked. On Saturday evenings, the store was like a hall with constant checker competitions on the pickle barrels near the stove. The store was a center of social activity and all the latest news. Customer satisfaction was definitely apparent as each shopper was waited on individually. An employee, such as Harvey Dalgleish, who worked there in the 1940s, wrote the desired order directly on the bill. Unlike today, credit was granted according to Wilfred's or Howard's knowledge of the customer. Many may remember on the hot summer days when little Leroy had a stand along the highway's side selling advance tickets to the annual Ottawa exhibition. In 1953, W.J. Porteous & Sons officially entered the IGA franchise. The following year, Wilfred's sons, Bill and Roy, the third generation, became full-time employees. The old electric till tallied $700 to $800 for a Saturday's business, but sales of today are incomparable to the sales of 1948, for example, which were $141,857.11. Known as the Glasgow Trading Post, the little corner store on the main street of Vernon has come a long way and has given the community what they want. And that is our business spotlight for this week. In this week's historical segment, we meet the McDiarmids. Donald McDiarmid and Catherine MacArthur lived in Kenmore, Scotland, and 4 of their children are on record as having come to Canada. I don't think Donald and Catherine actually came, but their children John, Anne, Archibald, and James did. Archibald married Catherine McClellan, daughter of William and Anne McClellan, in Scotland. Catherine's family, the McClellans, had 12 children, and only 3 of their daughters came to Canada with them. Mary married Donald McCarricker. Anne married a fellow named McGibbon and settled in Lachute. And Catherine married Archibald McDiarmid. And of course they stayed in Osgoode. Archibald was a carpenter, and he built a school in Prescott after landing in Canada. And then they moved on to Concession 4, Lot 37 in Dalmeny, and built a log house on their 200-acre property. He also did work in Perth, as Catherine is said to have walked there carrying their 8-month-old son, Daniel. Archibald and Catherine's children are: Mary married Alexander Stewart, son of James Stewart and Anne Meldrum, and she died after having 2 children, and then Alexander remarried. Daniel, who's also referred to in the history books as Donald, and he died of tuberculosis. Anne married John Campbell, son of Duncan Campbell and Janet Dow. You may have heard us cover them in our Campbell episode or our Dow episode. They had 7 children. The next son, William, also died of tuberculosis. Catherine married Thomas Campbell, again son of Duncan Campbell and Janet Dow, and they had 4 children. John McClellan married Elizabeth Ferguson, the daughter of John Ferguson with 2 S's and Christina Ferguson with 1 S. We covered them in our Ferguson episode back in the fall, and they had 6 children. And Archibald Jr. married Mary Ann Popham. He was only 10 when his father, Archibald Sr., died. And James, the youngest son, died of tetanus. So moving down the family tree, Mary and Alexander's children were James and Catherine, the 2 that they had together before Mary passed away. James married Helen Meldrum, who was a school teacher in Dalmeny, and they had 8 children of their own. Catherine married Joseph Rickey. They settled in Manotick, and they had 3 children. After Mary died, Alexander remarried to Anne Robertson, and then they had 6 more children. Anne and John's children were Duncan, Archibald, Catherine Anne, Thomas, Daniel Alexander, Jesse, and Margaret Mary. Now, Catherine Anne married John MacDonald, son of John MacDonald and Anne MacPhail. Jesse married John Duncan Daniel MacDonald, son of Alan MacDonald and Henrietta McLean. And Margaret Mary married James Finley Ferguson, son of John Ferguson with 1 S, and Jesse McLaurin. Of course, we mentioned them in the Ferguson's episode a while back as well. Catherine and Thomas Campbell's children are John, who apparently was unmarried and lived to be 101. Mary Ann, also unmarried. Jessie, also unmarried. And Freeman, who married Violet Edna Smythe, or Smith, daughter of George Hamilton Smythe, or Smith, it has a Y, and Matilda Johnson. John McClellan and Elizabeth's kids were Daniel Alexander Archibald, and he married Adelia Della Campbell. Mildred Millie Christina married Peter Sinclair Campbell. Catherine, or Kate, married William Rock. Ella May was unmarried. John Frederick married Janet Nettie Armstrong. These are Ross McDermott's parents, and Ross is the one who wrote all of the family history stories in the Pioneer books. There are, I believe, 3 of them altogether, so he did some great work there. And Annie Cram married Edwin Blair, and these are Gordon Blair's parents. He, of course, married Grace Saunders, who was Bob and Irene Saunders' daughter. They were my neighbors from Lion Street, and we featured them in the Saunders episode, also in the fall. John and Elizabeth took over the west half of the family property in 1878. I'll tell you a little bit more about that in a couple of minutes. And then finally, Archibald and Mary Ann's children were Catherine James, and she married J.B. Palmer, and they had 5 kids. Barbara Ann married Alfred Flack, and they had 2 kids. George Archibald was unmarried. John William married Margaret Davidson, and they had 4 kids. And James Edwin married Nancy McCurley, and they had 5 kids. Neil married Laura Gibson, and they had 3 kids. And Mary Amanda married William Lawson, and they had 3 kids. Lots and lots of kids and lots of history there. Archibald and Mary Ann lived in the stone house on Lot 40 of Concession 4 until they eventually moved to Manitoba. There's an interesting story, though, about the McDermotts in the Pioneer Families book. Of course, I mentioned that Ross was the one who wrote those. And indeed about Archibald Sr. Archibald Sr. died in 1850 at the age of 45. So at the top of this family tree, this man died at just 45 years old. And he had reportedly written his will just prior to passing away, and he bequeathed his farm, Lot 37, to his 2 eldest sons. However, they were still very young. One of them was 10 years old, right? And would not get it until they were 25 years old, so it was being held in trust. In the meantime, the widow Catherine was one of the executors and trustees. The 5 sons were Donald, William, John, Archibald, and James. Now, if you remember quickly, I told you what happened to each of them, but I'm going to tell you again in case you need a little reminder this soon. Donald and William both died of tuberculosis before they reached the age of 25. Archibald was the 4th son, and he farmed the east half of the Lot 37 after his father died until his mother died as well. And his sister Catherine lived at the farm with him until she married Thomas Campbell. The estate was finally settled in 1878, granting the family full access to the lot, and this was 28 years after Archibald Sr. died. John was the 3rd son, and he was granted the west half where he lived with his wife Elizabeth. And Archibald, of course, received the east half. He kept that only until 1884, when he sold it to the McConnells, and they later sold it to Fred Alexander. Archibald and Marianne then moved to Lot 40, Concession 4, and stayed there until 1890. There are many McDiarmids, and they're married into many families in the area, so this is a real snapshot today. But we're going to peek back on some more of this family in future episodes. But that is our historical segment for this week. In today's Community Voices segment, I want to share an article I found from 2014 that was written by Phil Jenkins for the Ottawa Citizen. It's a bit of a way to bring a kind of a current view of Vernon into this episode, and it's called Ottawa's Rural Neighbours Are Still a World Apart. Welcome to Verdant, Vernon, Ontario. And this was from November 3rd, 2014. Driving southeast down Highway 31 is unpleasant. Bottled up on bank, eyes right past Lansdowne, endless retail overkill on both sides, treadmill through the car lots, quick flit of green in a graveyard, new and soon-to-be dormitory suburbs with ironic names lifted from nature, trailer lots, a dead restaurant or two, into Greeley, low swampy bush waiting to turn into suburbs, a sign for Marvelville Road, where the superheroes live, and finally, 30 kilometers from the Peace Tower, past the Metcalf sign and the lights at Snake Island Road, the first sightings of working barns and silos and fields, and the existential, grinding hum starts to turn into a pastoral melody. 10 more kilometers, stop at the roadside farm store for local honey, save the bees, and the sign says welcome to Vernon. A minute later, I'm out the other side and across the Ottawa border. Pull a Yui, and I park for absolutely free, for as long as I want, outside the library, which looks like an old one-room schoolhouse, because it was. A large tile set in the wall above the porch dates it at 1882, which is like totally pre-smartphone. Standing at the roadside, with a nearby fenced-in barking dog posing as a burglar alarm, there are 3 churches at one end of the village, a convenience store in the middle, and a museum at the other. The village of Vernon was in Osgoode Township prior to the Great Amalgamation of 2001, and it was then, and still is, a quiet place, with its rural quota of communal tragedies and dramas, crimes and blessings. The church with the highest spire, visible from a tractor seat anywhere in the surrounding fields, and the tallest building in town, which dates from 1887, is Presbyterian. The female vicar's name is Chan, and there's a discarded beer can in the parking lot. How Canadian is that? The Anglican and Baptist churches are opposite each other, a minute's walk from the Presbyterians. The Baptists are advertising their harvest festival, which makes sense out here where there actually is a harvest. Judging by the dates on the primary buildings in Vernon, it was on the up and up in the 1880s, and leveled out somewhere along the line, with the older farmhouses and retired farming homes on the west side, and some newer semi-suburban homes on the east. The functional community center with a billboard outside welcoming Army cadets is relatively new. While I'm outside, a young woman in a teddy bear outfit runs out to her car and back. Halloween teddy bears picnic? For me, the heart of the village is the Osgoode Township Museum, which got going in the early 70s and is run by good, active folks and includes an agricultural museum. A plaque outside informs me that Alexander Rutherford, who was born in Osgoode in 1857, went west as a young man and ended up as the first premier of Alberta. Well, I've given several talks at the museum and enjoyed my visits with the people who take their neighbours in time seriously and who have good how-it-used-to-be stories of their own to pass on. The only curiosity in town is a Chinese Buddhist temple in a one-story building, an ex-general store, I suspect, with 5 enlarged historical photographs of Vernon pinned to the facade. There is not a word of English anywhere on it. According to Farid, the pleasant man who has run the convenience store for the last 12 years, the temple landed here several months ago and keeps itself to itself, as does the village. The Ottawa suburbs and the world in general get closer to Vernon every year. Hopefully, they will be slow in coming. Phil Jenkins. And that is our Community Voices segment for this week. In today's mental health moment, and as an ode to my musician friend John, I want to talk about the power of music in mental well-being. Music holds a special place in our lives, many of us anyway, and it can also be used as an important tool to keep our mental health healthy. Whether we play music all day long in the background, or choose a specific artist or genre when we're feeling a specific way, music can influence our mood, our attitude, and our outlook. Music therapy is becoming more common in children and adults alike and provides a safe environment to heal trauma, build resilience, lower anxiety, and lift depression. Research shows that engaging in music-making activities can even create a sense of community while helping heal. Music connects people and can create inclusive spaces to share it. Many musicians have even spoken out about their mental health, from postpartum depression to suicidal ideation. This opens conversations about the importance of mental wellness. I want to thank Dr. Fatima Reynolds of the American Psychiatric Association for the above research and words. In general, music helps. And that's this week's Mental Health Moment. Thank you for tuning into this episode of Osgoode Community Chronicles. I hope you enjoyed our connections from the past and our taste of the present. Now you know a little bit more about Vernon, old and new, a little about the McDiarmid family, and a little bit about my old friend John McDiarmid, who was a gifted musician. Jeff and I are going to get together soon to do the Al Capone episode for you, I promise. Maybe we'll even talk a little bit about how much fun we had working together at the Messenger. And finally, happy St. Patrick's Day if you celebrate. We will be out at the Heart and Crown in Barrhaven for the day. I hope to see some of you there. I know I will. Remember, you can catch all of our past episodes on Spotify, Apple, Google, Amazon, or anywhere you listen to your favorite podcast. And don't forget to tune in to the community calendar to find all of the events that we talk about on this podcast. Thank you again for supporting our snapshot of local community. I'm Tracy Daviero, and this has been Osgoode Community Chronicles, keeping our rural spirit alive, one story at a time. I'll see you next week.